Hi everyone, it's Ashley and welcome back to my kitchen as we start week 5 of the Pantry Challenge. First, we'll recap last week's meals and we'll make a meal plan for this coming week, which is week 5. I try to do that in every one of these Pantry Challenge videos, but then we're going to delve into the topic of what to do when you buy too much of something. Now, this could be a bulk or large purchase that you've made, or a tablespoon of something that you bought for one reason and you might have a little bit extra. This can even apply to overplanting in the garden. And in order for this to not become a stressful situation that's challenging and difficult to deal with, there's actually a lot of small and large things that we can do in order to solve this problem or prevent it from happening in the first place. So we will move on to that after the meals. I've also been trying to create a timestamp on these Pantry Challenge videos. So if there's only a certain part of the video that you want to see, you should be able to easily get to that part of the video. A quick thanks for those of you who sent an email from last week's Pantry Challenge video where we are talking about food goals. And if you want to join in this conversation, we are opening the door to be able to talk about goals as it relates to food, including food choices, meal plans, the whole mindset around food, and lots of good things like that. If you want to join us, just send an email to citystatekitchen@gmail.com and just say food goals. That can be either in the subject line or the text body, and we would love for you to join us. So let's do a very quick recap of week 4. Because I did a lot of repeat meals in my meal plan for this week because week 3 went so well. So if you want to catch some of these meals being made, go check out last week's video. The first day, so this would have been Sunday, day 1, we had meatloaf and broccoli. It was super simple, super delicious, and it was just a fantastic meal. On day 2, which was Monday, I made curry, and for this curry, I did it just like I did last week, and I used chicken, a mix of veggies, stir-fry type, almost identical to last week, and served it with rice. On Tuesday, day 3, we had meatballs, and I originally baked them, and then after baking them, I put them in a red sauce, and we served it over rice again. We've been having a lot of rice recently. The day 4 and 5, I did the same meal because it ended up turning out really good. What I did was I made a lamb stew, similar to how beef stew is made, except we used our home canned lamb, which is the lamb that I canned in beef broth. And so on the first day I did it, I wasn't sure how it would turn out. So I only made enough for one meal, but it turned out awesome. And we ate it all, so there were no leftovers. So I made it again the next day, and it was a hit again. Yesterday on day 6, I made chili, and I didn't feel like making like a regular bread, a regular biscuit, cornbread. So I did a quick search to see if I could find any recipes for cornbread biscuits, and I found some. So I made a cornbread biscuit, and it turned out really good. There's no sugar in it like my cornbread has. And yeah, I think it was like a 3-to-1 ratio of flour to cornmeal. So there's less cornmeal than my cornbread recipe, but anyway, it turned out great. And then tonight we're gonna have leftovers. So one other thing I did this week is I made another big batch of broth. I was in the broth headspace from the previous week, and so I thought I'm just gonna keep this rolling. And so instead of making a beef turkey like I did, this week I did a chicken lamb, and it turned out even better. I thought that last week's was so good, but this one even topped that. And one of the things I think made a huge difference was if you saw what I did in last week's video, I caramelized the onions in the oven. And last week I did it in a separate pan than the beef because I wanted to roast the beef bones too. But this week I actually used the same pan and I roasted the lamb with the onions. And because all the kind of fat came off the lamb as it roasted, it just turned out so good. I think the onions last week were a little drier, even though they got some caramelization happening. This week's was so much more complex and deeper, and I know it's because of those caramelized onions. So I highly recommend going the extra step to do stuff like that, because it just takes it, I mean, to a whole other level. There's no other way to say it. So I was able to get 7 quarts canned, and then we had about 6 or 7 cups left over, and we just drank that and then used it in like our chili and stuff like that throughout the week. So let's recap. Now let's make our meal plan for week 5. So I think what we're gonna do for week 5, this is gonna be a super quick recap because a lot of this stuff is actually not fresh. Most of these things will not be coming out of our fridge, but rather our freezer and pantry, which is great because this is a pantry challenge after all. We have a lot of broccoli in our freezer, which I'm noticing. And even though we've been eating a lot, we have some up here, we've got even more in the basement. So I'm gonna make 2 meals that are heavier on the broccoli this week. I'm gonna make like a sheet pan meal, and we have some bratwurst in the freezer. So I'll cook the bratwurst, chop it up, throw it in with a bunch of vegetables, including lots of broccoli, some oil, some seasoning, some salt, and then roast it in the oven. Our family loves it, and so that's going to be a good meal. I'm also going to use broccoli to make a broccoli cheese soup, and I think I'm actually going to make this to be a vegan version. I like to kind of mix it up, so that's what we'll do for another night. I'm going to do another tuna noodle casserole. Somebody mentioned it as a comment on one of my videos, and I made it last week. It was super good, so we're going to do that again this week. We have a turkey in our freezer, so I need to pull that out and put it in the fridge so it can start thawing. And so we're gonna do leftovers this week. I'm thinking it's gonna have to do something. It's gonna be something with that turkey because that's a lot of meat. And we might end up freezing some too. We'll just kind of see how it goes. But yeah, so we'll have the whole turkey one day, and then some sides. So we'll probably, easily throw some veggies or something with that. And then we're gonna do another meal, which I guess is sort of a breakfast for dinner. It's gonna be like instead of a bratwurst, it'll be a sausage, like a ground sausage. So I'll just brown that and make a hash with it and some vegetables, and we'll have it with eggs. We have our egg order coming on Thursday, so maybe we'll wait until Thursday so that we have really fresh eggs to eat with that dinner. And then one night we'll just have tacos, which will be super nice, super simple. We'll use our home canned beef, and it'll be a super quick throw together meal. This week also, the Azure order is supposed to come in on Monday. Finally, I still haven't decided if I'm going to do a separate video for that or I'll do it in next week's recap. It'll most likely be in the recap, but if I do make a separate video and your notifications are on, you'll see that one come out before next week. I was a little conflicted about putting in an Azure standard order during the pantry challenge. So when I go through the items that I purchased, I'll kind of give my reasoning behind the things that I purchased. So now let's talk about the topic of I bought too much, now what? I really wanted to ask you guys before this video how this is handled in your house. If you have issues of surplus, or really getting to the point of buying too much, if it's a problem, how difficult the problem is to solve, or if it's not a problem at all. And it was interesting to find that the more votes that come in, the more it seems to be pretty evenly split between those 3 things. 2 of the options on the poll were sort of related to the same idea of it being kind of like a pain point. Also, there were some comments that were fantastic, and there were some great ideas if you want to go check them out there. I think a lot of them had to do with the idea of storage being a really important part of dealing with food in general, and I 100% agree. I'm a huge believer in the way that you store things is really important, and what works for someone is not going to work for somebody else. You really need to find what is best suited for you, your family size, your consumption habits. All of that is so customized to you and individualized to you as a person or family, and it's just going to look very different. If you buy a 50-pound bag of oats and you go through them a lot, like we keep them in 3-gallon buckets, it takes about 3.5, 4 buckets to fill for 50 pounds of oats. But we go through them very frequently. But if somebody goes through them a lot slower, or they have a much smaller family, than we do, you might want to do them in smaller containers, because every single time you go into that bucket, you're letting fresh air hit all of those oats. Not to mention the fact that then as the container gets down and lower, the more resident air is going to be sitting in that container. So for us, because we go through them quicker, it's really not sitting around that long. But it's important that the buckets that aren't being opened are still well preserved. So if you have that 50 pounds broken up between 4 different buckets versus 10 different buckets, if you're only going in one at a time, you're going to keep those oats fresher longer. But that will be different depending on what it is that's being stored and how you consume it. Now, I'm also talking about this in a purely like working pantry type application. If you're talking long-term storage for things to just sit, these are going to be stored differently. It's a totally different conversation. So this is only focused on things that are being continually rotated through. So I have a lot of guilt about some of the things in our house right now, and this pantry challenge has really gotten me to focus a lot on the things that are sitting on our pantry shelves. I'm not as concerned about things sitting in the freezer too long. The random things I am, but a lot of the stuff is the shelf. I pretty well feel like our rotation with the freezer is good, but the things on the shelf, I'm noticing that things are sitting a little longer than I'd like them to. And there's a few things in particular that I feel like have crossed over from this is bulk food storage, it's here, we're using it, into the group of we over-purchased. And that's kind of hard for me to admit, because I am the kind of person who really is like more of a solution than a problem finder. If there's something that I need to work on, I just find a solution for it. And we aren't consuming them quickly enough to justify keeping the volume that we have. And a few of these things are the split peas. We've only had one meal this entire pantry challenge that dipped into our split pea storage. And another is our brown rice. And when we first started this pantry challenge, when we first talked about the rice, I was much more optimistic, and I didn't realize that it was the problem that it is. We are definitely going through the brown rice a lot, but we cannot buy it in that quantity anymore. It's just not one of those foods that we consume enough of quickly enough. I need to be purchasing in smaller amounts. So aside of the split peas and the brown rice, the other thing that's really bugging me right now is the steel cut oats. We have about half of a 3-gallon bucket that has steel cut oats. And what happened was that was our primary way of eating oats for a long time. And we really didn't eat rolled oats for a while. And so we were going through the steel cut oats, and I think we just kind of hit a breaking point where we were just done with them. And so then we switched over to rolled oats, and now we use them for everything. And so our steel cut oats just sits around. In fact, this morning I even made an Instant Pot. It's still hot, of steel cut oats, because lots of people in our house like steel cut oats as their oatmeal. Some people don't care, they'll eat whatever kind of oats. But a couple people would prefer something with a little bit more chew to it. So I got that up and I made that, which I was pretty excited about. I think what I need to do is bring those up and have them up here and just make them. The other thing that we can do with these to help get through that is they work really well in baked goods, muffins, and things like that, pancakes. So if I make some and then freeze them on a cookie sheet, similar to how I did rice last week or the week before, and put them in cup portions, piles, then I can freeze those, and then I know how much, if I just grab like a chunk, I know how much that is measured out to be. Let's go to the basement and we'll look at a couple other things. So here are those steel cut oats. It's a little less than half. But these split peas, look at this. This is the date. We're coming up on 2 years, and it's still so full. These are probably going to need to be canned in some way, because if I can take a product that's sitting here that's, undealt with and kind of takes a long time to prepare and turn it into a convenience food or convenience item, I can guarantee you that it's going to be eaten. So that's going to probably involve some canning to deal with those. And I'm just going to have to buy them in smaller amounts when something involving split peas is on my meal plan. So our furnace just turned on, so it's going to be a little louder, but the other thing I was thinking about were these beans. And if you've seen some of my other videos, I talk about these beans. We've used them quite a bit more earlier in the challenge, but it's slowed down a little bit. I think the reality is that we just don't eat as many prepared canned beans as I thought we would or do. These are all expired in August, and then these expired in October. And it's just black and pinto beans, and these are 24, I believe, ounce cans, 25 ounce. They're great beans. They're a great quality product. I got them on sale, but I can't justify a sale if these are still sitting here after so long. So I'm kind of disappointed in that. And I think what this is telling me is I need to not buy large quantities of canned beans. We do have dried beans, and I can certainly can them on our own. So if I'm feeling like, hey, let's get some shelf-stable beans ready to go, I can buy them dry, can them myself, or use some of the ones that we have dried, because dried beans store very well for a long period of time. I feel like rices like brown rice, oats, those can go rancid a little quicker, but dried beans stay good for a very long time. In fact, up here, these are some black-eyed peas we have. This is in a nice 1 gallon bucket. So that'd be a great thing to be able to can up. Another thing that we need to talk about on this topic is this idea of spices. Now, this is one of my sort of like bulk spice areas. This is some basil that I bought, and I need to transfer it over into a different container, but I'm not concerned because I know we're going to use it. It's probably our most used spice besides like garlic and onions, but I have cardamom, I have caraway seed, some allspice. See, I didn't even know this was down here. I was looking for it the other day. Some mustard, brown mustard seed. These are also the kinds of things that really need to be dealt with. Let's see, I know I have more spices down here, but I think those are the main ones. I'm actually going to go ahead and bring these upstairs because they're not going to get eaten by sitting down here. So let's talk about spices for a few minutes. Okay, so you know what? Let me look here too. A lot of these, let's see. I've got a bunch of stuff that doesn't belong in here. So as for the spices I found downstairs, clearly I bought them for a specific recipe. I was making mustard, but the caraway and the cardamom, I don't even remember what I bought those for, but I need to use them for something. You know, spices are actually a really great source of nutrition, and all kinds of antioxidants are packed into these herbs and spices, and they're very underrated in that way. And so using them up is a great way to boost nutrition and flavor. I've gotten to where I use spices a lot more liberally than I used to. I think that can be a common thing maybe in our country. I think in our country, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that a lot more flavor comes from this reliance on like oils and salt and sugar, but using herbs and spices is a great way to not only put a serious boost of nutrition into your food, but also such dynamic flavor. A lot of these spices are intended to be toasted before they're used, so that dramatically changes the flavor when they're in the dishes that they're meant to be used for. So anyway, this is some cayenne pepper. So I'm digging into these spices. I'm going to use them, but there's so many ways to get creative with spices, and if you're not sure about how to use them, just Google it. For example, you can use cinnamon in beans and rice. The first time I came across that, I was like really skeptical, but when I ate it, it was really good. I don't have an issue using up cinnamon, but if I needed to, I could do something like that. And so I know that there's lots I can do with the things that I have here that I need to use up. This is coriander. I can easily throw that in my chili. Ooh, rosemary powder. It's one of my favorites. This is also a really horrible way to store spices. I feel really guilty about storing them like this. I purchased a bunch of really nice jars specifically to store my spices in. You can use mason jars and just scale it to whatever volume you have. I chose to do this because I wanted to keep my jars mainly for canning, but I have this size and then I have a smaller size. So I have a couple different sizes, but the most important thing when it comes to storing spices, which none of these have, but the ones that I have in my cabinet have, is having a rubber gasket on your lid. So that's key because it keeps out air. When you get plastic, especially spices that come in plastic, that air can just get right in and spoil your spice. If you're wanting to try a spice for a new recipe that you haven't used before and you don't want to buy a large container because you're not sure if you'll use it, you should consider seeing if there's a place in your area that has bulk spices. That's what I try to do. That's why I have all these bags. It still is a problem, but if it's a new spice that I haven't used before, I'll try to just buy the amount that I need for the recipe so that I don't have the excess. And so food co-ops, I know like Whole Foods and places like that, also will have bulk spices. So the last thing that we'll talk about on this topic is the issue of garden abundance. I mean it to where it's a problem, not just, wow, we got a lot of this year and it was fantastic. I did not judge this, what this was going to turn out to be properly. When you have an abundance of something that you did not anticipate, whether it was having a bumper crop year or you haven't grown something before that just was super prolific or whatever the case may be, there's just utilizing the different ways of preserving food can really help with this problem. Let's take tomatoes, for example. When tomatoes come in, we usually have a lot of other stuff going on. It's just the timing of it. And the freezer has been fantastic. So whatever I don't can right away or can or preserve right away, I throw in the freezer. And now that I'm getting down to my freezer, I'm getting to my frozen bags of tomatoes, which I'll probably deal with. I still think I'm a couple weeks out from that project. I keep saying that. But the point being is that alleviates the stress of having to deal with more at one time that might become overwhelming. And the other great thing about using the freezer for tomatoes is that if you have like 5 tomatoes that ripen one day, 10 that ripen the other day, 3 that ripen the next, instead of feeling the pressure to preserve these in varying levels, it allows you to batch process your food, which is hugely helpful. Not all foods work this way though. So if you take cucumbers, for example, those are continuing to ripen on a continual basis, but they don't freeze well. And you want to preserve them as soon as you can. And one thing that I've found to be a great way to do this, small batch pickling is a great way, but also fermenting. So if you start a crock of pickles for fermenting, this holds about 3 gallons. You can just get a batch of pickles fermenting and then add to it. And then as you get more cucumbers, just throw them in, and then it'll just keep pickling. But between canning, freezing, dehydrating, fermenting, it really gives you a lot of different options and a lot of different tools. It helps to alleviate a lot of the burden that can come with having just a lot coming in. The other thing is to give it away. Between neighbors and local food shelves, there are always places that food can go to be eaten and put to good use. So these are just things to keep in mind. These are some ideas that I have. These are some ways that I deal with these problems. These are some things that I'm learning from still coming up with these problems. Please put in the comments any ideas that you have or things that you may want to add. I gotta run, so I hope you have a wonderful day and we will see you soon.